Hello friends, welcome to my channel Creating Essence. I am Megan. Thank you so much for stopping by today. For those of you who know what I do professionally for a job, I am a doula and part of my job is placenta encapsulation. Placenta encapsulation is not actually a new or new age or strange thing. It's one of those things that's strange in North America. And that's it. Technically called placentophagy, which means consuming your placenta. Number one is something every single mammal except humans do every single time without pause. As soon as the placenta is expelled, they consume it. In traditional Eastern cultures, and many European and South American cultures, there are traditional postpartum methods of preparing the placenta for consumption by the mother because of the immense benefits. Now, you may be wondering how it's like, what could it possibly benefit you to eat a placenta? Well, number one, it is one of the most absorbable forms of a nutrient supplement that a human can consume. When you are looking at supplements, whether it's a vitamin or a probiotic or whatever, one of the key things to look for is this supplement, is this nutrient that's been prepared in a form that the human body can actually absorb and use? Well, the placenta is created by the human body. It is the ultimate, completely absorbable nutrient. It is not an organ of the mother. It is not an organ of the child. It is something completely separate and miraculous that develops to attach the child to the mother and feed the child. But ultimately, it's really neither of them. So it's not any kind of cannibalism. It's not a living thing or a creature. One thing that you can relate it to is it's super common in kind of the chicken world. Feed the eggshells back to the chickens for a calcium supplement because, well, it's common to give chickens things like oyster shells and stuff that have high levels of calcium in them to help chickens be healthy. It is widely known that the absolute best way for chickens to get calcium is to eat their own shells because it is 100% absorbable by their bodies because it was created by their bodies. So everything about it is digestible and consumable and absorbable nutrient. It's like the chicken form of placentophagy. Now, what nutrients could possibly be in a placenta? Well, hormones, for one thing. The body during pregnancy has so many hormones fluctuating all over the place. Estrogen, progesterone, relaxin, oxytocin, so many different hormones that are created by your endocrine system that after you give birth are wildly out of control. It's something that most people's bodies eventually regulates, but there is enormous spiking of one and plummeting of the other and back and forth. And it is really rough on the woman's endocrine system, on their emotions, often on their mental health. It's just one of those things that's natural and the body can recover from. It just takes time. But with placenta encapsulation or placentophagy of some kind, you're naturally supplementing your body with your own hormones. It's not something you have to worry about clean sourcing. Most supplements that you'll find these days with any kind of hormones in them come from swine or bovine. If you're really lucky, it'll be some kind of phytoestrogen like comes from a yam. But those things are not entirely usable by the human body. They're not readily absorbable and they do have risks because they're not made for the human body. The placenta is also really high in protein and collagen and things like that that help the body recover, especially those soft tissues that can be damaged during any type of delivery, whether it's C-section or vaginal birth. So it's like a daily supplement that can really help your body's hormones regulate, help your body physically recover. And obviously none of this is going to be studied by the FDA. None of it is going to be supported by the FDA because the FDA doesn't produce placentas. So they don't regulate these things. They don't look into them. But there is literal centuries of evidence-based practice that shows the results. Before I made this video, I put up a couple of polls on my Instagram just to see who on there, number one, had heard of placenta encapsulation, number two, who had ever considered it, like, oh, you know, that's interesting, or no way. And if you had or hadn't, why not? What was your experience? In my poll, 87% of people had heard of it. 57% of people had considered it. When I asked what had made you decide against it, the answers ranged from things like, you know, I really wanted to, I had delivery complications that made my placenta unusable, and it was really disappointing, to, you know, I didn't get my contract in time, or I couldn't find an encapsulator locally, or finances were an issue, to things like, yuck, that's bleeping disgusting. Who the bleep does that? That's barbaric. That's cannibalism. Stuff like that. When I asked about people who had, why or what their results were, everyone who had done it was happy that they had done it. There were quite a few people that really wanted to, but hadn't found out till after they'd had a baby, and they were totally looking forward to being able to do it with future pregnancies. Several people who had done it themselves, and they would do it over and over and over again. And there were a couple of people who asked why. Why would you do it? I can tell you my story personally. With my first 3 kids, I had profound postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety almost from birth. It was intense. My hormone shifts were wildly out of control, and I had little to no support, and it took a toll on my mental health. I really deeply struggled for at least a year after every single one of my first 3 kids. And it robbed so much of my motherhood with them. It makes me so sad to think about. When I found out I was very unexpectedly pregnant with my 4th, I decided I had to do something different. I had to. There had to be a different way. This couldn't be motherhood for me. And one of the things I found that was very highly recommended was placenta encapsulation. I've not always been the crunchy chick I am now. I looked into it, I talked to my midwife about it, and she answered all of my questions, was able to give me very solid, excellent scientific information about how it can help. Not like proven studies, because like I said, those don't exist. Things about how that tiny supplementation of your body's own natural hormones every day help you come to balance so much more gently, and things like that. So we decided to go for it. I mean, it couldn't hurt. Now, what placenta encapsulation is someone who's trained in encapsulation comes and gets your placenta immediately after birth, and they clean it completely in a sterile environment. It is steamed. It can be steamed with any number of things. I personally do traditional Chinese medicine method, so it's done with lemons, jalapenos, and ginger. And those things are natural anti-inflammatories, and the steaming process is very high heat for at least 30 minutes. It kills any possible bloodborne pathogen. I am trained in what it takes to kill those pathogens. I am trained in dealing with bloodborne illnesses, so I'm very well aware of those things, and I'm very careful to make sure that those levels are met for a consistent period of time. After it's steamed, it has shrunk up considerably and it is basically sliced and everything is put into a dehydrator where it's then dehydrated at a heat high enough to continue to prevent any bacterial growth, to kill any kind of pathogens that may still exist until it is really brittle. Then you put it in something like a blender that grinds it down, grinds everything down into a powder, and you put it in little capsules. And every day you take a certain number of capsules, 1 to 3 times a day, depending on how you're choosing to take it. So you're getting a very concentrated dose of the nutrients of that placenta. There's no taste, there's no aftertaste, there's absolutely nothing. You don't burp up any weird flavors. I am grateful that I was able to successfully practice placentophagy with my 4th, and that was a transformative experience. My postpartum period with him, I did not have any postpartum depression or anxiety. I did not have any kind of baby blues or anything of the sort. He was a very difficult posterior delivery. It was one of my longest labors. He was huge. He was 9.5 pounds. My body was able to regulate well and come back to good health and hormonal balance and recovery so quickly. That was the only thing that I had changed about how I did the postpartum period. So I knew it couldn't be a coincidence. When my 5th was born, unfortunately, he was born not alive. And when that is the case, the placenta cannot be used for encapsulation. And once again, I had postpartum depression and anxiety. It was compounded with grief and a number of other things, but I still had the same issues when I was not able to use that placenta postpartum. When my 6th was born, I by then had been trained in placenta encapsulation and had done quite a bit of it professionally. So I encapsulated my own placenta. And once again, it was such a great postpartum period. It was another difficult delivery for a whole host of different reasons. It was my first real hospital birth. It was very emotionally traumatic. It was so difficult. I had ended up medically needing to get an epidural to get him out. He was another 9.5 pounder, and still I was able to encapsulate my placenta when he was about 48 hours old when we got home from the hospital. And my body once again was able to regulate so much more easily, was able to even out those hormones and recover physically so much more easily. And now I am 35 weeks with baby number 7, and I will be encapsulating her placenta. I still do it professionally for other families and have had nothing but amazing stories of improved postpartum recovery. And I know that's all anecdotal, and I'm okay with that because there's really no harm in doing it when a placenta is encapsulated responsibly and according to safe practice guidelines. There was a story that made the news a few years ago where a woman had her placenta encapsulated and she was GBS positive. GBS is group beta strep. It is something that all of us pregnant women are tested for at 36 weeks because it can be really dangerous to the baby, even though the mother never knows whether she's colonized or not. Even though it made the news, when you looked into the details, that encapsulation was actually a raw encapsulation and a raw preparation, which means the temperatures in the processing were pointedly kept below a certain point. The mother ended up reinfecting herself repeatedly with group beta strep. The baby got very sick, and it was a very tragic situation. When the placenta is prepared in a way that where any bloodborne pathogens, including group beta strep, have been killed, there has never been a documented case of any kind of risk or detriment to the mother or baby. One question I have received a lot is how my husband felt about placenta encapsulation when I first brought it up. So I figured I would bring my husband in so he could answer those questions for you. So when I first mentioned placenta encapsulation back when I was pregnant with Aaron, do you remember what your initial thoughts or reactions were?
Okay, so initial thoughts were, oh, that's a thing? People do that?
What made you kind of warm up to the idea or make you consider it a viable option?
You did a lot of research, and you were having, you've had issues with postpartum depression that was pretty serious, and you had done some research that indicated that this would help, and that seemed to help. And then there was the second time around that you were a little more prepared for it, and it definitely made a difference.
And that's how he feels about that. I know this is kind of a weird topic, probably controversial for some. All I can say is it helped me. It is something very natural that God created. It is perfectly legal, it is perfectly safe, and it helped me immensely. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section below. I'm always happy to answer them. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I'm fully prepared for some thumbs down too. That's just the kind of topic it is today. But I thank you all for hanging out. Subscribe to hang out for more, and we'll see you again soon.